In 1939, an international organization decided to put together a global tuning standard. It was headed by John D. Rockefeller and his organization. At that time, they decided that although many people around the globe were using different tuning standards, they wanted to standardize it to a simple 440 hertz. Now, the challenge with that was that if we add up 4 plus 4 plus 0, does it equal 9? It must answer at 9. If not, it will not have a perfect geometric correspondence. And as I said, geometry is simply the music that we listen to with our eyes and our sight. Maybe when music has been written by the likes of Bach and Verdi and Mozart, they intended to have certain notes have certain emotional qualities and texture and context come along with them. There's a certain quality that is intended to provide a contrast. Does our current equal temperament system provide us with that degree of contrast reference? And I don't believe it does. So what happens if we now change that process? Let's have a listen to see what precise temperament tuning sounds like. Isn't that beautiful? Now, where else do we see music coming in the form of matter? Well, we see it in even the periodic table of elements. Now, Mendeleev refers to the periodic table on a linear table, but nothing in nature is on a linear table. Instead, it's a spiral. We've renamed that the periodic wave of elements, where every single element in the periodic wave is just another musical representation from a family of notes created from perfect fifths and major thirds. Even isotope relationships on this periodic wave are created from the musical interval relationships that exist inherent to nature. All of it operating off the simple principle as well of a base 9 mathematics. If we look at the polygons that are all around us every day, an equilateral triangle is a good place to start. Equilateral meaning that it has 3 angles that are interior angles, and each is 60 degrees. They sum to 180 degrees. Notice 1 plus 8 plus 0 equals 9. Let's move on to a square. 360 degrees are the sum of angles, of the interior angles of a square. 360 degrees is 3 plus 6 plus 0 equals 9. How about moving on now to a pentagon? 540 degrees is the sum of its interior angles. 5 plus 4 plus 0 equals 9. Now, what if we made a conversion for those different geometric forms that we call polygons, and we converted simply each of their values into Hertz frequencies using the exact same conversion value? What do we get? Well, nothing other than the most beautiful 5-part harmony of F sharp major chord. What we're seeing with our eyes is really just the F sharp major chord in 5-part harmony, and we're looking at it as polygonal geometric forms. Now, you might ask, well, is this true for 3-dimensional geometry as well? And how about hypercubes and tesseracts? The answer is yes. You will not find a geometric form that exists in the Archimedean solids or Platonic solids, or what's also called and referred to as the Catalan dual solids even, that doesn't sum to the number 9. If this is the case, shouldn't we be looking differently at how and what we allow the music to enter into our lives to be. Maybe also, this is why we're so attracted to geometric forms. Maybe at a subtle level, our brains are nothing more than QR code readers as we look at geometry all around us every moment of every day, always looking for the signature of the source. And often, we see that represented as mathematical constants, and one of them in particular, the golden ratio, 1.618. The golden ratio defines what we look at and conceive as beautiful around us, just as it does so in music as well. The golden ratio is based off of a number series called the Fibonacci series of numbers. So as we look at each of these numbers, we notice that the relationship between each of these successive numbers, the larger the number becomes, is 1.618 multiplied by the prior number. Maybe this relationship is something so much more fundamental that we should all be studying to understand it, because it becomes the signature of universal source. Is it possible that even the geometry that we see around us is formed simply by some musical note that is either above our audible spectrum or below our audible spectrum? Sound emanating out from the silence. Is that also what is separating light from darkness? As we look at a unification theory of science, I can't help but think about the famous words of Leonardo da Vinci: learn the art of science and study the science of art. Realize that everything is connected. Learn how to see. I believe fundamentally that the way for us to learn how to see is first and foremost to notice that everything is connected. There is no action that we see in this world that doesn't have an underlying relationship to another action. We're all connected through that series of myriad of interactions, that most of which cannot even be perceived by us, but they're always there. A good way to look at the universe around us is to notice that even in things like cymatics, we can see new structure and new form and new organization and new pattern in our universe. It's a beautiful thing. I believe that the entire universe is patterned. What we refer to as random is really only the parts of the universe that we haven't figured out the encryptions for yet. The encryption exists, the pattern exists. It's just above and beyond our zone of perception and intelligence. Let me talk a little bit about dimensions. Let's start with a simple line. A line is the first dimension. Now let's place another axis point on that line, and now we can measure those 2 points of intersection and finish them out in mirror form. Now we have a square, or any other form. We measure that in area. The next form would be to pop that out with a z-axis so that we can see the third dimension of that cube now. So the square turns into a cube. But the next form after that would actually be a cube that would rotate. Now, we think about a cube as the third dimension, but it's stationary. In order for us to experience life, all life is in motion. Therefore, we have to accept and understand that we live in the fourth dimension, where the fourth dimension is the axis of motion. We measure motion through time. The next dimension is simply an expansion of time. We see time as a linear one-way street function. But the principles of music and physics would point to the fact that all dimensions of time exist simultaneously. And if that is so, then the next experience for us as a higher dimension, as we push the boundary of the persistence of our own perception will be to experience different dimensions happening simultaneously of time itself.